We will now turn this on to live stream for family, friends, and the gallery to observe. So at this time, I'm going to ask all members of the courtroom, if you please would stand and raise your right hand so I can swear you in, including witnesses, team members, gallery members, and scoring panelists. So thank you. First of all, team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? I'll say aye if you agree. Or shake your heads, that's fine. If anybody disagrees, shake your head the other way. All right, they all agree. You are now under oath. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? All shake your head yes if you agree. Anyone disagree? All right, they all agree and they're under oath. For gallery members, including teachers and attorneys, coaches, family members, and friends, do you promise to represent yourself as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? Since I can't see them, I'll place them under order to comply with this oath. And lastly, scoring panelists. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? If you do, please shake your head yes. All right, they all agree. Okay, with that, let's proceed to some preliminary matters. And please be mindful that any of your preliminary matters may be taken into the time consideration. So first of all, on behalf of plaintiff Dakota Weirs, are there any pretrial matters that you would like to take up, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, do you have a copy of our trial roster?
I do not, but I wrote it down as you went through it.
Would you like me to send a link in the chat?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you.
Your Honor, do the scoring panelists have a copy of our trial roster?
Scoring panelist?
I do not.
We do now that you put it in the link, Judge.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Your Honor, do you have copies of all the exhibits and stipulated facts from the court case?
I do. Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to stop time in case of technical difficulties?
I'll preliminarily allow that subject to any further argument depending on the procedures and how the case proceeds. But that is granted for technical difficulties, not of the team or the presentation.
Your Honor, the plaintiff requests that the witnesses refer to the exhibits instead of screen sharing.
Okay.
Your Honor, permission for exhibits to be constructively published to the jury after the exhibit has been admitted into evidence.
Okay, we'll hear from the other side on your request in a moment.
Your Honor, permission for the plaintiff to reserve time on the closing for rebuttal.
All right, that'll be granted.
The plaintiff asks that the same privileges excluding time for rebuttal be granted to the defense.
Subject to their arguments different than yours, I'll grant that.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further preliminary matters.
Thank you. And on behalf of defense, in response to those requests, any other pretrial issues you'd like to bring forward?
No further preliminary matters, Your Honor.
All right, any objection to the request by plaintiff regarding exhibits and screen sharing?
No objections.
All right. With that, is counsel for plaintiff Weirs ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. And I'll allow counsel to both make brief opening statements. You may proceed. Good morning.
Lush's money fears silenced Dakota Weirs. Dakota was a healthy prodigy destined for Juilliard, but right before the beginning of a talented future in piano, it all fell before his eyes. When he was ready to leave, he found that he was unable to sit for a simple scale. He spent his entire life following in his grandfather's footsteps and pursuing the piano. He performed for listeners all over the state and was offered numerous scholarships. He was even a part of the National Honor Society and regularly volunteered. After all of his hard work, all of his dreams were coming true. As Dakota was set to leave for Juilliard, full ride scholarship in hand, he began to feel sick all the time, with dangerous weight loss and chest pains and painful, swollen lymph nodes. After many hospital visits and tremendous medical expenses and consultations with multiple doctors, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a cancer caused by environmental conditions such as pesticides. Dakota had been a landscaping technician since he was 14 years old. He worked for a company called Havens Landscaping, and they worked with a product called Lush Fertilizer, the company you see before you today. This fertilizer has a chemical compound called Druf on it, which has been known to be carcinogenic in rats, which you'll hear from Dr. Casey Rogers. Developers had a concern about these carcinogens, but elected to ignore them and the actions they could have and should have taken. This negligence rooted from the fact that the company desired to prioritize their income over safety. Lush's money fears silenced Dakota Weirs. We are here today because Drufo caused Dakota Weirs' illness. You will hear from Dakota Weirs himself on how this illness has affected him, how everything he has ever worked towards crumbled through his fingers in a matter of months, how he can barely sum up the energy to do something that was his entire life, and how due to Lush's negligence, he has lost the comfort of a secure future. You will hear how Lush Fertilizer's lack of action has destroyed Dakota. You will hear from Carson Durst about how Lush blatantly ignored health risks with their knowledge of the consequences. Lastly, you will hear from Dr. Casey Rogers, who will provide a variety of evidence to connect Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. On the defense, you'll hear from Blake Doncourt, founder and CEO of Lush Fertilizer, and how he prioritized his profits over the safety of his customers. You will also hear from Skylar Weirs, who is Dakota Weirs' twin, and who is testifying against him in court today. Lastly, you'll hear from Dr. Devin Williams, who leads the toxicology research and development labs at Lush, and the lack of responsibility he decided to carry throughout his work. All of these witnesses will exemplify how Lush's money fears silenced Dakota Weirs. Lush Fertilizer and Blake Doncourt suffered numerous losses in the past years, but instead of using these events as learning experiences and opportunities to grow, they used it as an opportunity to cut corners, with the knowledge of how it would hurt the people who trusted them. If Lush had any suspicions that their product may harm their users, they should have taken the necessary measures to warn their users, such as a warning label to let them know that their product could cause a fatal cancer. If they fail to do so, they are negligent. Preponderance of evidence is the burden of proof, meaning that you should turn in a verdict for whichever side has the most substantial evidence. Both the plaintiff and defense have to meet a burden of proof today. It will be clear that at the end of the trial, we have more than enough evidence to prove that we have met our burden of proof and that Lush is guilty of negligence. You'll find that Lush's money fears silenced Dakota Weirs, and that's why you should turn in a verdict for the plaintiff. It has shown how Lush has made the admittedly harmful choice simply because it was easier. Therefore, what is to stop them from making the easy and cheaper choice, no matter how harmful? Because it benefited them, despite its impact to their customers and Dakota.
Thank you, counsel. And defense, would you like to make a brief opening?
Briefly, Your Honor. Lush Fertilizer is being blamed for Dakota's bad judgment. My client, Lush Fertilizer, is being accused of causing an illness that isn't a result of their product. The plaintiff is pinning the blame for Dakota's non-Hodgkin lymphoma on Lush fertilizer. Despite this, Lush's consistent application of safety protocol and administration of product testing, alongside Dakota's previous use of various other pesticide brands, shows the negligence to care on the fault of the user rather than on the fault of the company. Lush fertilizer can't be blamed for Dakota's bad judgments. As stated earlier, we are here today under an accusation of an ingredient in the Lush fertilizer product causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma in Dakota Weirs. We understand that this is terribly unfortunate. However, this blame cannot be put on us, as it was the plaintiff's bad judgment which resulted in their choice not to wear the protective clothing while using the product. Lush's products have undergone a multitude of company testings. The plaintiff's boss describes the mandatory protective gear that was needed to be worn when working with lawn products, such as the ones Dakota was actively using on the job. They then explained the refusal to wear such cautionary clothing. This was their own personal choice, meaning they could have prevented this, but they misjudged just how serious the situation was, and Lush can't be blamed for this. Alongside this, Dakota Weirs worked with numerous pesticides and lawn products. Lush's consistent application of safety protocol and administration of product testing shouldn't be the target for Dakota's illness. The plaintiff is expected to meet their burden of proof by preponderance of evidence. This means that they must prove that something is more true than probably not. We ask you to answer these two questions. One, did Dakota Weirs fail to do something that any reasonably careful person would do under the same or similar circumstances? And two, was the conduct by Dakota caused by their claimed injuries, damages, and losses? If by the end of the trial, you decide that both these questions are true, you must enter a verdict. We also ask that if you find the plaintiff was negligent, that you must determine the extent of negligence of both Lush Fertilizer and Dakota Weirs contributed to the damages. The total amount of damages will then be reduced by the percentage of negligence by Dakota. Today, you will hear from several of our witnesses. They are as follows. You will hear from Blake Doncourt, the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer. She will explain their prestigious company testings of their product as well as their compliance to federal and state laws. Blake will also describe the apparent lack of connection between Dakota Weirs' illness and their product. You will hear from Skylar Weirs as well, who is Dakota Weirs' twin. You will hear about Skylar's editorial work in The Rationalist, a quarterly science magazine. Skylar will explain that she spent around a year studying the ingredient Drufo. She wants Dakota to receive justice. However, she doesn't believe that it should come from Lush. Lastly, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, who leads the Toxicology Research and Development Lab at Lush Fertilizer. Dr. Devin Williams understands when a substance will harm the user. She will explain that Drufo is not connected to Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Dr. Williams will also explain her take on Casey Rogers' study being unreliable. The plaintiff will agree that it was their own choice not to wear the protective clothing, but they will also say there were no warnings on the product label that said the product was carcinogenic. We will show you that there are recommendations on the label that say to utilize protective clothing, which Dakota chose not to follow. Lush Fertilizer's consistent application of safety protocol, administration of product testing, and compliance with laws leaves no room for Lush Fertilizer to be blamed for Dakota's bad judgments. The two questions needed to be answered today are: one, did Dakota Weirs fail to do something that any reasonably careful person would do under the same or similar circumstances? And two, was the conduct by Dakota caused by their claimed injuries, damages, and losses?
Thank you for your opening and presentation of the case to the jury. And counsel, would you like to present your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs to the stand.
All right, Mr. Weirs, good morning. I'll just remind you, as a pretrial matter, you've been placed under oath and you can proceed.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Dakota Weirs, spelled Weirs.
Let's start with your experience working as a landscaping technician. How long have you been a landscaping technician?
I've been a landscaping technician since I was 14 at Havens Landscaping.
What was an average day of work for you?
I primarily spread the seed and the fertilizer because I wasn't quite old enough to work the large and heavy machinery yet.
How were you exposed to Lush Fertilizer?
Lush fertilizer was a product that I used during my employment at Havens.
When did you begin to feel sick?
I began to feel sick right before I was set to leave for Juilliard and several years after working in the landscaping industry.
What did you do after you began to feel sick?
I visited numerous doctors and hospitals, and after an extensive amount of medical bills, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
What does this diagnosis mean for you?
To be honest, it's really scary. I don't know if things are going to get better or if they're going to continue to decline.
Let's move on to Drufo. What is Drufo?
Drufo is the chemical bonding agent that's in Lush fertilizer.
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Response?
Your Honor, Mr. Weirs used Lush fertilizer in his employment, therefore he would know that it is in the fertilizer.
Any response to that, counsel? There you go.
Opposing counsel, can you repeat the question, please?
What is Drufo?
How would Dakota Weirs know what Drufo is when it is a chemical rather than the fact that it's just in Lush fertilizer?
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
You may.
My witness stated that it is a bonding agent in fertilizer, which he knows, and because he worked with it, he would know how and what the chemicals are.
Okay. I think what I'll do for purposes of the jury is to instruct them that he is considered a lay witness right now, and he can testify to what he believes it is, subject to further cross-examination, noting he's not been declared an expert in that area of fertilizer. Go ahead, you can proceed.
Mr. Weirs, how did you learn about Drufo?
I learned about it when I saw a news story about Lush fertilizer and their main ingredient, Drufo.
What did you do after learning about Drufo?
Of course, I immediately called my dad, and I reached out to my old landscaping job to warn them and to make sure that it was the fertilizer that I had been using. And I asked them if they had any packaging left over.
Your Honor, I ask that everyone refer to Exhibit 1.
Is there any objection to referring to Exhibit 1? If so, you can state, otherwise you may proceed.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Mr. Weirs, do you recognize Exhibit 1?
Yes,
What is Exhibit 1?
it's the Lush fertilizer label.
How do you know what it is?
I used Lush fertilizer during my employment at Havens.
Is it a true and accurate representation of Exhibit 1?
Yes,
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence.
All right, any objection to Exhibit 1?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 1 is admitted.
What are the ingredients in Lush fertilizer?
Drufo, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and iron.
Are there ingredients that you recognize on this label?
Yes, I recognize Drufo.
What warning signs are on the label?
Keep out of reach of children, causes eye irritation, avoid contact with eyes or clothing. As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended. Users should wash hands before and after the use of this product.
Does this document show any warnings that the fertilizer may be carcinogenic?
No, it does not.
Your Honor, I ask that everyone refer to Exhibit 2.
All right, subject to admission.
Do you recognize Exhibit 2?
Yes,
What is Exhibit 2?
it's the Lush fertilizer label from their fertilizer that's sold in France.
How do you know what it is?
I researched it and I translated it.
Is it a true and accurate representation of Exhibit 2?
Yes,
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 2?
Your say, Your Honor.
Go ahead. Any objection
This-
to 2? Go ahead.
This would follow under 801D2 opposing party statement.
Any response?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Based upon the testimony of how this document was created, I'll admit it for the purposes of his statements regarding the ingredients.
Mr. Weirs, what are the ingredients listed in this exhibit?
Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and iron.
Do you see any mentions of Drufo on the French label?
No, I do not.
Where is the fertilizer without Drufo sold?
It's sold all over the world in countries like Canada, Liberia, Haiti. It's been outlawed in these countries for years.
Let's talk about Skylar Weirs. Who is Skylar Weirs?
Skylar Weirs is my fraternal twin. We participated in nearly identical activities growing up, other than my landscaping job, because Skylar is allergic to grass. She couldn't participate in it.
What type of work does Skylar do?
She's a freelance writer, and she's also a part-time server at a restaurant.
Oh, hold on, Mr. Weirs, just a moment. There's an objection.
Lack of personal knowledge.
Okay. Response?
My witness has previously testified that he knows Skylar Weirs due to a family relationship, and therefore it's reasonable that my witness would know what type of work they do.
All right. Any further response?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll allow it since it's a family member and his twin, and so you can proceed about that if it's relevant.
Mr. Weirs, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
What type of work does Skylar do?
She's a freelance writer, and she's a part-time server at a restaurant. Or she writes articles relating to things like anti-vax culture, UFOs, and chemtrails.
How has Skylar testifying against you today affected your family?
I just can't believe that my own twin would take the stand against me. Skylar has extensive gambling debts, and when my parents decided to help me pay my medical bills, Skylar became resentful that they weren't helping her pay hers, and it has grown the rift in my family even wider.
Speculation.
What's the objection, counsel? I'm sorry.
Speculation.
All right. Any response?
As my witness is a part of the family, it is a reasonable statement for them to know how their family is feeling about the situation.
All right. Anything further? So I'll allow it subject to cross-examination and more foundation about his family relationship and the impacts of this. That goes to bias as well. So you can proceed.
Let's talk about your health condition. What was your lifestyle prior to your illness?
I worked super hard in school. I was a member of the National Honor Society, and I worked.
Relevance.
Counsel?
This is foundation of who my witness is and habit, routine, and practice.
Anything further, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Since the issue before the court is damages and the impact of the alleged fertilizer, it may be helpful for the jury, but I'd stay more relevant in time. You can proceed.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
What was your lifestyle prior to your illness?
Of course, I tried really hard in school and tried to set myself apart from my peers, but I also volunteered all the time. Community service is something that's extremely important to me, so I tried to give back to the less fortunate members of my community. Also, when I was younger, my grandfather helped me discover a passion for piano. He has since passed away, but I think because of that, my passion for piano has just grown because of my connection to him.
How has your piano playing progressed into present day?
Well, because of my ability to play the piano, I actually received a full ride scholarship to Juilliard, which was something that I was absolutely thrilled about, but I can no longer attend in my condition because there's no way I could complete such a rigorous program.
What monetary damages have you suffered?
Of course, my medical bills and my inability to attend Juilliard, but also I don't have any solid future of income.
How has non-Hodgkin lymphoma affected your everyday life?
Besides my swollen lymph nodes and my severe fatigue, I can no longer sit for long periods of time because of my shortness of breath and bruising, which has obviously caused my inability to play the piano. And because of that, it was something I was passionate about. And that was my connection that I had to my grandfather. And without that, it feels like I lost him for a second time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Weers. Let's discuss your work with fertilizer and other related products. You worked for Havens Landscaping since you were 14.
Yes,
You worked in several different environments, such as soccer fields, shopping centers, and office buildings.
yes,
Your boss told you to cover up when working with chemicals.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay, hold on. Any response?
Effect on the listener.
Any response?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So it's unclear to the court if that witness, the boss, will be testifying, but I'll just let the jury be aware that that is hearsay, but he can testify to directions his employer gave him as it may be relevant to this lawsuit. So you can proceed.
Your Honor, permission from my co-counsel to screen share Exhibit 1, or to view Exhibit 1.
You may.
Mr. Weers, do you recognize Exhibit 1?
yes,
It's a Lush fertilizer label.
yes,
You saw it when you received a picture of the label from your boss?
yes,
This is a fair and accurate representation of the label.
yes,
Your Honor, I'd like to acknowledge that this exhibit has already been admitted into evidence.
That's so noted. Thank you.
Mr. Weers, please follow along while I read the user safety recommendations. The safety labels on the instruction states, as with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning, maintaining personal protective equipment. Users should wash hands before and after use of this product. The instructions say to use protective clothing.
yes. However, none of my coworkers did either. We were all in shorts and t-shirts.
So that's a yes. The instructions did say to use protective clothing.
Yes,
They also say to use a respirator or N95 mask.
they do.
Your boss told you to always wear long sleeves when using fertilizer.
Yes, but it was so hot outside, and wearing all of that, like long sleeves and pants and everything in the instructions was unreasonable with how hot it could be.
So that's a yes. He did tell you to cover up,
Yes.
but you chose not to.
Yeah, and all of my coworkers did too.
Aside from Lush fertilizer, you also use several other fertilizers while at Havens Landscaping.
Yes.
There were warnings on these other fertilizers.
Yeah, usually.
There were safety instructions on these other fertilizers as well.
Yes.
Some of the other instructions also told you to use eye coverings
Yes.
and face coverings,
Yes.
while others instructed you to only use them outdoors.
Yes. However, using them indoors or outdoors wasn't something that was within my control.
So that's a yes. They only instructed you to use them outdoors.
Yes.
Yet you use these products indoors in places such as the lobby and in office buildings.
Yes. And I was just an employee, so I didn't have any control over where we put the products.
So that's a yes, that you did use these places indoors.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Why didn't you wear the protective equipment?
Not only did none of my coworkers wear it, but also we've we've all been in heat in Colorado with how hot it can be, wearing long sleeves and pants and a face covering, all of that. I was worried that it could have been dangerous wearing all of that in the sun and the heat.
Could you control where you used fertilizers?
Of course not. I was just an employee and that was my boss's decision.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Weir, you can step down. Your next witness.
Your Honor, before we begin, may I ask where we are at time?
If the timekeeper can put that in the chat. I don't know if you're able to see that, but you're welcome to proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Carson Durst. That's D-U-R-S-T.
Let's talk about why you're here today. What's your connection to this case?
I was employed at Lush Fertilizer from 2003 to 2006. I initially started as an intern and was hired straight out of college, but after only 3 months, I got promoted to product development engineer, which was actually really exciting.
What work did you do as a product development engineer?
Well, as a product development engineer, I specifically worked on researching the safety of a particular chemical compound in Drufo, nitrogen phosphorus carbonate. But while I was at Lush, they were specifically working on the testing of safety surrounding Drufo in general.
Let's talk about Drufo now. What is it?
Drufo is the chemical bonding agent in Lush Fertilizer.
Did you find anything significant in your research?
I did actually. I found a study from England that suggested this compound that I was studying was carcinogenic in rats.
What did you do with this information?
I documented this study in my lab notebook, which was common practice for everybody on the research and development team. One of our upper managers, Gary Langley, is supposed to look at all our lab notebooks and compile all the findings in there in a single report.
Your Honor, permission for the witness and opposing counsel to refer to Exhibit 3.
You may refer to it, subject to it being admitted.
Ms. Durst, do you recognize Exhibit 3?
I do.
What is it?
It's the study I had previously mentioned.
How do you know?
Because I documented this in my lab notebook.
Who conducted the experiment?
The Mattis Bernard Research Center.
Was this a publicly available study?
It was.
Do scientists often summarize their research in a study?
Yes, they do.
Ms. Durst, is this a true and accurate copy of the study and its results?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
All right, any objection to Exhibit 3?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Response?
Your Honor, this study will be used for effect on the listener, not for the truth of the matter.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. I'll allow it under Rule 1004 as well, because it's content of other information, writings. Yeah, and I'll just instruct the jury that this is not this witness's opinion and merely information be relied upon.
Please summarize the conclusion in your own words, Ms. Durst.
So this study is using rats to simulate this compound's potential carcinogenicity in humans in occupations involving frequent unprotected exposure to this compound. So that would be people like farmers or gardeners. And the conclusions state that rats that were exposed to higher levels of this compound were more likely to develop cancer than rats that were exposed to lower levels of this compound or not at all.
Please explain the study's relevance to this case.
Well, this study found that this compound is carcinogenic in rats. And if it's carcinogenic in rats, then it's most likely carcinogenic in humans. And if this compound is in Drufo, well, Drufo is carcinogenic.
Ms. Durst, let's talk about the studies that Lush conducted. When was the study on potential carcinogenic effects of Drufo conducted?
It was conducted in September of 2003.
What were the conclusions of the study?
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this falls under Rule 801D2, statement made by the opposing party. The study was, the report was published to the witness by Lush Fertilizer.
All right. Any further response?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll allow it subject to cross-examination as a statement by the defendant.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
What were the conclusions of the study?
The study concluded that there needed to be more testing done to determine whether Drufo was carcinogenic or not. The report didn't specifically mention non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, although it did mention risk factors which would include any type of cancer.
Was there a turning point to your career at Lush?
There was, and it happened right after this study, actually. All of a sudden, I began receiving negative feedback from the senior members of my team. They accused me of just skating along and not doing my work, which was really hurtful because I thought I was doing the best I could.
Did it affect the assignments you were given?
It did. I started receiving all the assignments that nobody wanted.
What did you do about the negative treatment you were facing?
I kind of just faced it. I thought that eventually it might go away, but after a while, it became evident that Lush was going to fire me. So I began looking for other jobs, and it only made sense to stay in the same field. So I applied for a job at Terra's Greenery.
Did you face any pushback from Lush for this decision?
I did. When I began working for Lush, I signed a non-comp agreement with them, which I don't particularly remember signing because you have to sign so much paperwork when you start a new company. But this agreement outlined that I could not disclose trade secrets, which I didn't.
What's the objection, counsel?
Hearsay.
Response?
Can I get a clarification as to what the hearsay objection was for?
Yes, Ms. Durst is clarifying that the non-comp agreement stated certain things. It's using a statement from an out-of-court statement as truth of the matter.
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
You may.
The non-comp agreement is a regularly conducted business activity, and it is something that Mr. signed. Furthermore, it was made by the company of Lush, so it would also be an opposing party statement.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Well, it does sound like it is a normal record of the business that is at issue here as a defendant, and it may go to bias and could be relevant with regard to plaintiff's claims as well. So I'll allow you to proceed forward with that, noting that there was a non-compete clause, but you can move forward.
Can you elaborate on the non-comp agreement you signed, Ms. Durst?
Yes. So the non-comp agreement outlined that I wasn't allowed to disclose trade secrets to companies outside of Lush, which obviously I didn't. I applied for Terra's Greenery, which is one of Lush's biggest competitors. However, there weren't many job openings at the time I was applying, and the fertilizer field isn't necessarily that big. And I wanted to receive a salary close to what I was receiving at Lush. So it only made sense to apply for Terra's Greenery.
How was the conflict resolved?
The conflict was resolved by reaching a settlement that I wasn't allowed to work at Terra's Greenery for a period of 6 months.
Ms. Durst, let's just briefly touch back on the studies that you mentioned that Lush conducted. Your Honor, permission for everyone to refer to Exhibit 4.
All right. Subject to it being admitted.
Ms. Durst, do you recognize Exhibit 4?
I do.
What is it?
It's an email I received while working for Lush
How do you know?
because I received it.
Ms. Durst, is this a true and accurate copy of the email that you received?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Is there any objection to Exhibit 4?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Response?
Your Honor, this is a statement made by an opposing party, Rule 801D2, as it was sent by an employee of Lush.
All right, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Since it is a document from the defendant, I'll allow it subject to it having foundation and relevance here today regarding Mr. Weir's claim. You can proceed.
Who were some notable people that received this email?
Well, if you look, you can see that the third person is Alex Monroe, which was one of our managers at the time I was working there. You can also see my name, Carson Durst, Blake Doncart, who's the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, and Gary Langley was the one who sent this email, which was another manager at the time I was at Lush.
Can you summarize this email, please?
Yes, this email is stating how Lush verifies study outcomes specifically to the recent in-house study that they did on whether Drufo was carcinogenic or not. It outlines how they may find certain findings conclusive and that they're reopening the study and assigning new product teams to the new study.
Please read the second paragraph out loud.
Following our lab's June Drufo study, concerns have arisen regarding generalized findings of potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples produced during a period early in the year. So we are reinitiating the study in the coming weeks with fresh product samples. Development engineers and lab techs are also invited to participate in briefings by senior management on target marketing positions and economic strategies planned for Drufo as a study refresh proceeds.
During this time, did you face any pressures for certain results in your research?
I would say we did, and this became particularly evident to me when I received this email and it was talking about economic strategies and target marketing positions. Why would a company be worried about that if they're also worried about Drufo being carcinogenic or not? It was obvious to me that upper management wanted our conclusions to fit a narrative that they desired, and that's why they were reinitiating the study.
Despite the pressures you faced, what concerns did you or any others raise about Drufo?
I remember during a particular meeting, concerns were brought up that Drufo was specifically linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. After this meeting, we were expected to not share anything that had happened in this meeting, and we were expected to keep our findings in the walls until we actually knew what we were doing.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. Let's talk about your life working at Lush Fertilizer. When you started working at Lush, they were testing the safety of Drufo?
Yes, they were.
You were tasked with researching one of the chemical compounds that comprise Drufo?
Yes.
Gary Langley was your product manager at Lush Fertilizer?
Yes, Gary Langley was.
The product manager reviewed everyone's work on the study.
Yeah, Gary was supposed to review all of our stuff, although I wasn't around Gary Langley 24/7, so I have no idea whether Gary Langley really looked thoroughly through all of our notebooks or not.
And the results of the study were sent to senior management?
They were.
As the report went to senior management, you can only speculate on the concerns that were raised about Drufo.
That is true. Obviously, I was one person on the research and development team, and I wasn't in a high enough position to be involved with executive decisions. So what they decided on and what they talked about, I don't know.
The following September, Lush conducted another in-house study.
Yes, they did.
And this in-house study focused on whether Drufo was potentially carcinogenic in humans rather than rats.
Yes, it did.
You did not have access to all of the data being analyzed in the study?
No, I didn't. Again, I was one person on the research and development team, but knowing that what I researched and what I put in my lab notebook that was supposed to make
Yes,
sure.
you did not have access to all the data being analyzed in the study?
Yes.
There has been no study that has conclusively stated that Drufo is carcinogenic in humans?
No.
After participating in the study, you were put on a performance improvement plan?
That is true.
Then in December of 2006, you were fired from Lush Fertilizer.
I was, and then I began working for Terra's Greenery.
You signed a non-comp agreement with Lush Fertilizer.
Yes,
The agreement meant that you could not work for any company that would benefit from the disclosure of those trade secrets that you knew.
yes, it did. But Terra's Greenery is a very large company, and even though they're Lush's competitor, they've been around almost as long as Lush has, and they have enough money and resources to develop all kinds of products, and especially ones that I wouldn't be surprised that outperform Lush's equivalent on the market.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, why were you put on a performance improvement plan?
I was put on a performance improvement plan because senior members of my team continually started to criticize my work. I can only speculate as to why they began criticizing my work. I was obviously working at the same quantity and the same quality I was when I first began working for the company. So I can only assume that maybe they were jealous that I was working my way up through the ranks so quickly.
Did you disclose any of Lush's trade secrets, Ms. Durst?
Of course I didn't. Again, Terra's Greenery is a huge company. They don't need Lush's help to develop their products.
Do you believe you had enough knowledge to help Terra's Greenery outperform Lush?
No, I didn't. Again, I was researching only one of the compounds in Drufo. While I was aware of the entire chemical makeup of Drufo and Lush Fertilizer, I wasn't specifically working on the research of those other compounds.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Durst. You can step down. And counsel, do you have another witness on behalf of plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Who would you call?
Dr. Casey Rogers.
All right, doctor. And just a reminder, you're still under oath. You can proceed.
Good morning, Dr. Rogers. Would you please state your full name and spell the last for the record?
Casey Rogers, Rogers.
Let's begin by discussing your education and experience. What exactly is your education?
I have a PhD in agriculture and entomology from the University of California at Berkeley, and I also have a Bachelor of Science in agriculture and chemistry from Colorado State University.
What did you do prior to earning your PhD?
Prior to earning my PhD, I worked for a large multinationalist chemical company as a research analyst.
What were your roles as a research analyst?
Well, my main role was to support clients and consultants by collecting, summarizing, analyzing, and synthesizing important business information on how to solve specific problems.
What subjects do you research?
The main subjects I research would include agriculture, chemistry, entomology, toxicology, things like that.
What courses, if any, have you taught?
I've taught agriculture, entomology, introduction, agriculture, entomology, food crops, and herbicide selectivity in action.
Your Honor, at this time, may everyone please look at what has been previously marked as Exhibit 7.
All right.
Dr. Rogers, do you know what this is?
I do.
What is this?
The list of my research publications,
How do you know?
because I made it.
Is it a complete and accurate copy of your research publications?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 7 into evidence.
All right. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 7 will be admitted.
Dr. Rogers, what are the majority of these publications relating to?
The majority of these publications are relating to Drufo and the negative health effects that comes with Drufo.
Have you conducted any studies around Drufo?
I have. I've conducted a pretty extensive study on Drufo and the long-term health effects of it, which includes non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to tender Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in the fields of research analysis and agriculture entomology on the basis of education and experience.
All right. Any objection or voir dire?
No objection or voir dire, Your Honor.
All right. You will be so qualified, doctor.
Dr. Rogers, what is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Non-Hodgkin's
Objection,
lymphoma
Your Honor.
is
Yes,
Improper expert testimony.
response?
Your Honor, my witness has testified that they have done multiple studies around Drufo and its negative effects, one of which being non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Therefore, my witness would have more than adequate knowledge to testify on what non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is and some of its effects.
All right, anything further?
Your Honor, I believe that this witness would need to be an expert in a medical field in order to be able to testify on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and the severe side effects that it may include, and they're not an expert in any of those fields.
So what I'll allow you to do in the area of expertise is you can testify with regard to your understanding of how that is connected to the pesticide and chemical fertilizer community, noting for the jury you are not a medical expert and they should take that into consideration, okay? Go ahead.
Dr. Rogers, in your opinion, or to your knowledge, what is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
To my knowledge, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a specific type of cancer. It affects your white blood cells, also known as your lymphocytes, and it will make you immune compromised.
What are symptoms of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Symptoms of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma can include fever, night sweats, anemia, loss of appetite, weight loss, nature all over the body, fatigue, things of that nature.
How does a person contract non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
It's not genetic. A person contracts non-Hodgkin lymphoma usually through different environmental conditions, one of which definitely being fertilizers.
Let's move on to Drufo. What exactly is Drufo?
Drufo is the chemical binding agent found in luscious fertilizers.
When did you first learn about Drufo?
Drufo caught my attention right when it hit the market.
How was Drufo developed?
Drufo was developed in 2003 by Lush's research and development team.
Are there any safety concerns around Drufo?
Definitely. There was a study conducted in Britain that proved that Drufo is carcinogenic in at least rats, and if it's carcinogenic in rats, it's almost definitely carcinogenic in humans as well.
Let's move on to your study. What procedure did you utilize for this study?
So I used people that had been very frequently exposed to Drufo, almost on a daily basis. People who had only been occasionally exposed, and then a control group, which consisted of people who had never been exposed to it.
What specific type of people participated in this study?
Specifically, the people who were frequently exposed were farm laborers. The people who were occasionally exposed were gardeners, and the people who had never been exposed were just people who had never been around the product.
What did the study monitor?
The study monitored Drufo and the long-term health effects of it, one of which was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
How were the participants exposed to Drufo?
They were exposed to Drufo primarily through the aerosolized version, through breathing it in, but also through contact with their skin.
And what did the study find?
The study found that compared to the control group, people who had been frequently exposed were 10 times as likely to contract non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. People who had been occasionally exposed compared to the control group were 5 times as likely to contract non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
No further questions.
All right, do you have cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Rogers. Let's start by discussing your experience testifying. This is the first time you have testified as an expert witness?
Yes, but my research has been used not only in litigation, but also in front of administrative advisory boards.
You want to continue to testify as an expert witness in future cases on this topic?
Definitely. I feel I'm more than qualified to testify as an expert witness on this topic.
You would like to testify as a witness in such lawsuit?
Yes.
Now, let's move into talking about your study. You are concerned about several agriculture products.
I was, and that should really speak to the effect of how dangerous Drufo is. The fact that I was concerned about several things, and Drufo was what spoke to me, it should speak to how dangerous the product really is.
You personally conducted a study on the long-term effects of Drufo?
I did.
The group of people exposed to Drufo consisted of farm laborers.
That's true.
These laborers were exposed to other potentially harmful chemicals besides Drufo.
Possibly, but Drufo was the main concern here, seeing as how it had been proven previously to be carcinogenic in rats. Like I said earlier, if it's carcinogenic in rats, you can bet that it's carcinogenic in humans.
So that's a yes. They were exposed to other potentially harmful chemicals.
Possibly, yes.
Let's move on to your recommendations on how to reduce exposure. People who use Drufo should wear long sleeves.
They should.
People who use Drufo should wear long pants.
Generally, yes, they should wear long pants.
People who use Drufo should also wear a protective mask.
Yes.
The plaintiff followed all of these recommendations.
No, the plaintiff did not follow these recommendations, but it's my understanding that the conditions that they worked in were extremely hot, so hot that they could have been at risk of heat stroke. It could have been dangerous to wear long sleeves and long pants in weather conditions like that.
So that's a no. The plaintiff did not follow your recommendations.
That's a no.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers, why do you want to be on the forefront of these battles?
I want to be on the forefront of these battles because I'm qualified to be on the forefront of these battles. I've done an extensive study on this. I teach classes on these topics. I have a PhD in this category. I am more than qualified to be on the forefront of these battles, and people should learn the truth that Drufo is dangerous.
No further questions.
All right, doctor, thank you for your testimony. You can step down. Does plaintiff have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests their case.
Thank you. Defense, are you ready to proceed and present your first witness?
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Thank you. And good morning. Just to remind you that you are still under oath and you may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Doncourt. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Blake Doncourt, Doncourt.
What is your occupation?
I am the proud founder and CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
When did you start the company?
The year 2000.
Let's start by discussing what Lush does for the community. How does Lush distribute their profit?
Lush puts 10% of its profits towards environmental charities who in return help reduce the nitrogen footprint on this world and just end up making Mother Earth a better place to live on.
What else has your company done to help our Earth?
Lush Fertilizer likes to educate people on the environment, how it works, and how we can just help keep the environment more sustainable and just a better place for us to live with.
What does your company have to show for this?
Lush Fertilizer itself has won the very prestigious SEAL Sustainability Award, along with I have been nominated and awarded numerous awards for my humanitarian work within the community, which I am very proud to say.
Let's turn our attention to your purpose in this case. Why are you here today?
I'm here today because Lush Fertilizer is being falsely accused of putting an ingredient within their fertilizer named Drufo.
What is the purpose of this in your fertilizer?
Drufo is a very strong binding agent that helps bind the chemicals on the grass. It helps less eutrophication within our Earth's waters due to it having to be put on their grass that it is put on a less amount of times than other grass and fertilizer would.
What is the plaintiff claiming Drufo causes?
Their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, may I add, is a very sad story, especially when I heard about it. I feel very sorry for Dakota Weirs, but Lush Fertilizer and Drufo is just not the cause of it.
To the best of your knowledge, is Drufo dangerous?
To the best of my knowledge, no, and I do believe it is safer to use than other fertilizers.
Why do you think Drufo is not dangerous?
Drufo has had many rigorous tests on it by my research and development team here at Lush, and we have concluded that it is not, or we have not concluded that it is a dangerous chemical.
What else would have concluded that Drufo could be a risk?
if there were any outside studies done, but there haven't been any that have been valid to me.
Are you aware of Casey Rogers' study on the effects of Drufo?
I am, but I do believe it is completely invalid due to it not being published in a scientific journal. There, for me, it means it is not reliable.
Let's discuss your past employee, Carson Durst. Who is Ms. Durst?
Carson Durst was a former Lush intern for my research and development team. They were very, very good friends with my son. They went through high school and college together, and it ended up just not working out for them. I believe that they are very talented at first, coming fresh out of college, and it ended up just not working out. They ended up having very poor performance, and I ended up having to fire them from Lush.
Did Carson bring up any claims about Drufo?
She did, but it was only after she was fired from Lush, very ironically. But while she was at Lush, she never brought those claims up to me or to my attention at all.
What were those claims about?
That Drufo was actually a carcinogenic and that it was dangerous. Also, that we falsified our reports in order to just receive money from our consumers, which I would never do because I am an environmentalist and I do care about my customers and the environment.
Could Ms. Durst have brought this to your attention before?
She had every chance to, and she never did.
Are you aware Ms. Durst gave us an email bringing up these claims?
I am aware, but that email is completely falsified and manufactured. I never received such an email within my inbox.
Let's move on to the agreement between you and Carson Durst. Did you and Ms. Durst sign any agreements when she was a Lush employee?
We did. We both signed a non-comp agreement to help prevent trade secrets between companies.
Would you be able to recognize a copy of this agreement?
I would.
Your Honor, permission for everyone to reflect what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5?
Subject to it being admitted, you can do so.
Okay, so sorry.
It's okay.
Can we pause time for technical difficulties, Your Honor?
All right. Go ahead. You can resume. Go ahead.
Ms. Durst, do you recognize Exhibit 5?
Yes, I do.
What is Exhibit 5?
It is the non-comp agreement that both me and Carson Durst signed.
How do you know that Exhibit 5 is the agreement?
I signed it.
So that is your signature at the bottom?
Yes, it is.
Is Exhibit 5 a complete and accurate copy of the agreement?
Yes, it is.
Do you regularly have employees sign non-disclosure agreements?
I do.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 5 into evidence. Its accuracy and authenticity has been stipulated.
All right. Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Hearsay?
Any response?
It's not hearsay as it falls under 8036, records of a regularly conducted activity.
All right. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. I agree. It sounds like this is something that was used by the company and is a normal part of their procedure. To the extent it may be relevant, I'll allow it to come in under 803.
Let's discuss Exhibit 5. What was the purpose of the agreement?
The purpose of this agreement was to prevent trade secrets between companies.
To the best of your knowledge, did Carson disclose trade secrets in violation of the agreement?
I believe that they did, yes, because Terrace Greenery, who they are working for now, is about to come out with a new product that is very similar to Lush fertilizer, apparently, but claims it is not carcinogenic.
Let's discuss your relationship with Carson Durst. Why did you hire Ms. Durst?
Ms. Durst was a very close friend of my son's and was honestly just very close to my family.
Objection. Relevance?
Counsel?
This makes the fact that Carson was hired because of his past relationships more probable.
Okay, any response?
Your Honor, I don't see how Carson Durst being hired due to any past relationships has a connection to Dakota Weir's having cancer.
All right, anything further?
So this does create a sort of bias for,
Okay, so I'm not sure it is terribly relevant other than the fact that Carson testified. So as to how that may bias that witness in their testimony, I'll let you proceed. But otherwise, I would have sustained the objection. Okay, go ahead.
may I re-ask the question?
You may.
Why did you hire Ms. Durst?
Ms. Durst was very close with my son and was very close to my family. My son and them did everything together really throughout high school and college and even elementary school. They were very talented, at least to my belief. And I also thought that they had a lot of potential coming fresh out of college with everything that they had, but they ended up just not working out for Lush Fertilizer and our high standards.
What was Carson to you when she was growing up?
Carson.
Objection. Relevance.
Response?
This again makes the fact that Carson was hired because of past relationships more probable.
All right, anything further?
Yes, I would like to also object to cumulative, as it has been established in the previous question, the relativity of Carson being hired due to his past relationship with Blake Doncourt.
Anything further? So the prior history and relationship may go to bias of the witness. I do believe she's already testified to the historical relationship, so you may want to try and move on from that subject. But I'll overrule it and you can proceed.
Well, no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Doncourt. You are the CEO of Lush Fertilizers.
Yes, I am.
As CEO, your job is to make big decisions.
Along with the decision of others, yes, it is my job.
Being CEO, you would know of any safety concerns related to your product.
I would only know safety concerns if they were brought up to me. I am not on the research and development team, therefore I cannot say if there is any or not unless they are brought up to me.
You've testified that Drufo has what you said, quote, insignificant levels of toxicity in our fertilizer, end quote.
I have testified to that, yes, because that is what my research and development team has told me.
You've also stated that, quote, baking the fertilizer would remove any risk that our fertilizer was carcinogenic, end quote.
It would, but it was just way too costly for the little risk.
That little risk that you also stated was, quote, simply overkill.
Yes, I did state that, and I still stand by that statement.
Your Honor, may everyone please flip to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 8.
All right, subject to it being admitted.
Ms. Doncourt, you know what this is.
I do.
This is a chart you made showing how baking Drufo would affect your profits in the coming years.
Yes.
You know this because you made it.
Yes, I did.
It's a complete and accurate copy of the chart you made.
It is.
Your Honor, I'd like to admit Exhibit 8 into evidence.
All right, any objection to 8?
Your say, Your Honor.
Your Honor, this isn't it. Sorry. This is an exception to hearsay under Rule 801D2. This is an opposing party statement.
All right, any further response?
No, Your Honor.
All right, it goes to part of her testimony here today. It's also a document created by this witness as the CEO of the defendant. So I will allow it as a statement by a party.
Ms. Doncourt, if I could direct your attention to the top of this exhibit, it says that baking costs would result in an increase of 1% per year.
Yes, but that 1% per year over the 10-year span would be an estimated $10 million in lost revenue.
You've stated that you were able to donate 10% of your profits to charities.
Yes.
You also stated that baking the fertilizer was too expensive.
I have stated that, yes, and I still stand by that.
Let's move on to Carson Durst. Carson Durst left Lush Fertilizer for Terra Greenery.
Yes, she did.
Terra Greenery is a rival company of Lush.
They are, but I like to consider them healthy competition.
Healthy competition that is now coming out with a product to rival yours.
They are, yes.
Ms. Doncourt, while in the development of Drufo, the judge ordered you to pay what you said was, quote, so much money per month, end quote, to your ex.
They did, and I don't think they deserved it, but I still pay it.
You've also stated that you needed to pay your employees more to keep them at your company.
I do. I like to have loyal employees, and if a little bit more money is what it takes, then that's what it takes.
No further questions.
All right. Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, why didn't you break Drufo?
It was way too costly for the little amount, and all of that lost revenue is able to go towards charities and paying my workers more.
What do those charities do?
They help the earth and help the nitrogen footprint on our earth and just help make the environment a lot better place.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. You can step down. And your next witness.
The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Your Honor, the witness computer seems to be having some brief issues. The computer is not allowing us to change the name of the witness. The field is it's just not changing. It's not letting us type anything into it.
Okay. Why don't you state your name then for everybody for the notes, okay?
Okay. I am Kitty Wright, and I will be portraying Dr. Devin Williams.
Thank you. And Dr. Williams, just to remind you, you're still under oath and you can proceed with your question.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Dr. Devin Williams, Williams.
Let's start by discussing your credentials and education. What is your education?
Well, from PhD to undergrad, from undergrad to PhD, I studied at CSU in Fort Collins. And then afterwards, I went to Utah and I did a specialized course on pharmacotoxicology.
What experience do you have in toxicology research?
Well, I've worked at Lush Fertilizers for, about a decade now. And I have been a part of their research and development team for about 7 years. And that just means that I basically look at research and the results of research, and I analyze them and I determine how different chemicals can affect the average human.
What training have you received?
I have received training in research and development and understanding how to analyze those results, and I have received training in pharmacotoxicology.
What is your employment history?
Like I said, I've worked at Lush for a decade now, and I've worked in their research and development team for 7 years. And before that, I was the chief medical examiner in Larimer County as a toxicologist, and I've been a professor at multiple different universities.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to tender Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of toxicology research and development on the grounds of her knowledge, education, skills, training, and experience.
All right. Any objection or voir dire of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So you will be qualified to testify as an expert in those areas. You can proceed.
Let's start by discussing your part in this case. What is your role here today?
I am here today because I genuinely do not believe that Drufo was the cause of the defendant's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, of Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Let's discuss the science of Drufo. Why is Drufo important in Lush products?
So Drufo is really important in Lush products because it acts as a binding agent. So when you spray it onto a plant or a flower or anything, it really clings to it. That means that when it rains or when you water it, it doesn't wash away as easily. And that really just minimizes how much of it goes back into the environment, and it just eliminates those negative effects.
What studies have been conducted regarding Drufo?
Lush has conducted multiple different studies on Drufo and the safety and just how to make it a better product.
What did they reveal about Drufo's connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
They revealed that there was not an increased correlation of users who use Lush fertilizer and who are exposed to Drufo and those who develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, we can't exactly say that Drufo doesn't cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma because science really just doesn't work like that. You have to take into consideration the random element of it all. For example, just to summarize, if you had a container of 1,000 red jelly beans and 1,000 blue jelly beans, and you took a total of 10, you would not have a 50-50 split. You wouldn't have 5 red and 5 blue. It just doesn't work that way. Now, if you increase that and you have 100 and you take 100 in total, it still wouldn't be that 50-50, but it would be much closer. So naturally, one side might just have more and one side might just have less. So in the studies, someone could potentially develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and one person could not. But through our research, we have shown that that correlation just is not increased with the use of Drufo.
Let's move on and discuss Dr. Rogers' analysis of the case. Are you aware of Dr. Rogers' study on Drufo?
Yes, I am aware of Dr. Rogers' study.
Who was part of Dr. Rogers' study?
So Dr. Rogers chose 3 main groups of people. He chose farm laborers, casual gardeners, and people who are not exposed to Lush fertilizer or Drufo. And my problem with this is it's like comparing apples to oranges. The farm laborers are exposed to multiple different chemicals in their everyday life, and even casual gardeners are exposed to so many chemicals. He really needed to compare farm laborers who used Drufo and farm laborers who didn't. That would be comparing apples to apples.
In your expert opinion, is Dr. Rogers' study reliable?
In my expert opinion, no. There are just too many problems with it, and it's never been peer reviewed, and more importantly, it's never been replicated. So it's really hard to trust a study that hasn't been looked over and a study that hasn't been replicated.
Do you believe that Drufo was the cause of the plaintiff's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a terrible disease, and listening to Dakota Weir's testimony about how it has affected him is so heartbreaking to listen to. But this misguided lawsuit is not being brought up in a way that it needs to be. It is a terrible disease. However, Drufo just was not the cause of the defendant's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, let's begin with your expertise. You know if a substance will harm the average human?
Yes, I analyzed the results and I determined that.
You would know how to neutralize that harm?
Yes, through the results of multiple different studies.
You predict broader outcomes that may result from data?
I do.
You didn't predict any broader outcomes related to Lush fertilizer?
No, the results did not tell me that I needed to predict any broader outcomes.
Or Drufo?
Can you explain your question?
You didn't predict any broader outcomes related to Drufo?
No, I did not. Not in the case of it being carcinogenic or having it be risky at all.
Despite the fact that you claim to take into consideration ifs in science?
I do, absolutely.
Lush doesn't bake its products.
They don't. No, there's no need to.
Baking their products would neutralize a cancer risk.
The cancer risk that is so small.
Lush didn't neutralize the cancer risks by baking the product.
No, the cancer risk just was not high enough. So there was really no point in doing so.
That's a yes, that they didn't neutralize cancer risk by baking their product.
Yeah, they didn't need to.
Let's talk more about your occupation. You lead the toxicology labs at Lush?
I do, yes.
After 50% of the original Drufo development team had left the company.
Unfortunately, yeah, they did.
You were hired as a technician because this turnover was affecting testing timelines.
I was also hired because of my experience, but yes.
But you were hired because of the testing timelines, correct?
Yes, as well as my experience and knowledge on the study.
You needed to keep the fertilizer development cost effective.
Yeah, that's a very big important thing for Lush Fertilizers is keeping it cost effective.
Let's move on to what you know about Drufo. Drufo is banned in Europe.
Yeah, not because it's carcinogenic though.
Lush could have fought this ban.
They could have, but they were such a new company and they really just did not have the resources necessary to adequately fight this.
They didn't fight that ban because they didn't have enough resources.
Like I just said, no, they didn't, and it's really unfortunate they weren't able to fight that when it happened.
They didn't fight that ban because it was easier to produce a product that didn't include Drufo.
Yeah, and also we just didn't have the money, we didn't have the funds and the resources, so that's the unfortunate choice we had to make.
I simply need a yes or no answer for this next question. Lush decided to make the less environmental choice because they were too new of a company.
Unfortunately, yes.
If Lush were to lose in this lawsuit today, your occupation would be affected?
It could potentially, but that's why I'm confident testifying here today because I'm confident that they won't lose.
It's a yes that it could be affected.
Potentially, it could.
Lastly, you admit to having a financial bias in this case.
I do, not as big as Casey Rogers, though.
That's a yes that you have a financial case.
Yes, it's not as big as Casey Rogers.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, why did Lush not bake their product?
Lush didn't bake their products because they didn't see a need to. The study that showed the cancer risk was so not well made that it didn't seem necessary and it would have been so costly to do so. So we made the decision not to.
And why did Lush choose not to fight the ban on the nitrate directive?
Lush chose not to fight the ban, one, because they didn't have enough money, but two, because it wasn't being banned because it showed a risk to humans. It was being banned because it contained nitrogen, and we just didn't have the resources, so they chose not to.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Dr. Williams. You can step down.
And then, Your Honor, for our next witness, can they just introduce themselves the same?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Your next witness?
I'm Caitlin Duffy, and I'll be portraying Skylar Weers.
Thank you. And do we have counsel for defendant?
One moment, Your Honor, the document is loading. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Skylar Weers, W-E-I-R-S.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Permission to pause time for technical.
Sure, go ahead and get your computer fixed.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Excuse me. Skylar Weers, W-E-I-R-S.
Let's talk about your background. What is your relationship to the plaintiff?
I am his twin sister.
What is your current occupation?
I am currently an investigative journalist.
What do you do as an investigative journalist?
I researched and wrote a few articles on consumer safety and corporate policy.
Why are you testifying today?
I'm testifying today because I've done extensive research on Drufo, and I love my brother. He's my other half, but Drufo did not cause his non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Let's move on to your research. How long did you spend researching?
I've spent almost a year now researching.
When did you start looking into Drufo?
I started looking into Drufo supposedly before Dakota's court case, but it's almost been a year now that I've been looking into Drufo.
Describe your research about modern agritech in Drufo.
Well, what I do first is I read and analyze articles from the USDA and the NASDA, and then I track down their sources and their relevance, and I deep dive and analyze those sources, and it's just a endless cycle of researching and analyzing.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to tender Skylar Rears as an expert in agritech on the grounds of her knowledge and experience.
All right. Any objection or voir dire?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe the witness has laid enough foundation as to whether their sources are credited or not.
All right. Response?
Your Honor, I believe my witness has testified to the sources they used, but I can re-ask the question.
Okay. I'll let you go ahead and proceed, and you can re-ask the question.
Can you describe your research about modern agritech and the sources you used?
Yes, so I usually go for the most reliable resources.
Objection, Your Honor.
Good.
Compound question.
Why don't you rephrase and re-ask the question so the jury understands what you're asking?
What sources did you use in your research?
So I use the most relevant sources I could find and just the most best resources available to me. And those were articles from the USDA and the NASDA.
At this time, I do move to tender Skylar Rears as an expert in the fields of agritech on the grounds of her knowledge and experience.
Okay. Any objection or voir dire?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll allow you to testify in that limited area of expertise, and you can proceed.
What article series did you write?
I wrote a brief explanation for Drufo and other agricultural products on the market.
What magazine was this published in?
This was published in the magazine The Rationalist.
What is The Rationalist?
The Rationalist is a nonprofit magazine that is committed to just getting rid of any pseudoscience theories, scientific skepticism, basically anything science related. We really try and deep dive and get the facts out of all those.
What is Old Guard?
Old Guard.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Relevance.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness's testimony will go into the effects that Old Guard has on the reputation, and they would want to negatively affect Lush. That makes the fact more probable.
Okay. Any further response?
I stand by my objection, Your Honor.
All right. What I'll allow is you can testify that subject to cross-examination, and then you can address that relevance.
Permission to re-ask the question?
You may.
What is Old Guard?
Old Guard is a sector that is just committed to wiping out all this new agricultural technology, including Drufo, off the marketplace and just trying to get rid of it. I mean, that's horrible for our world and Lush Fertilizer because that would get rid of their main mission if they can't survive.
What are some of the risks of modern agriculture products?
Well, some of the risks of modern agricultural products is the pesticides use, but it actually is able to reduce those. Like, for example, Drufo is really able to reduce the pesticides used within it. And there's just always going to be risk. That's how science works.
How is the application of Lush products different when compared to other fertilizers?
Well, I mean, for starters, 150 studies show that there is a 22% increase of yield, and there's a 37 decrease in pesticides use, which is hugely significant. And furthermore, 800 million people have casualties due to malnutrition. And these new agricultural products, such as Drufo and Lush Fertilizer, is able to gain 153 million reclaimed crops per year And that's equivalent because that's the size of France.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Again, I'm having technical difficulties. I cannot see the screen anymore. My whole computer went black.
Okay. Do you need a moment?
Can we clarify that time has been stopped, Your Honor?
It has, based on the technical issue. I'm sorry. Thank you. To the extent we can hear you, you would be welcome to proceed, and we can continue time. If you need that screen, then we'll wait for you to get it up and running.
Your Honor, I believe opposing counsel has left the meeting and plans to rejoin, I hope.
Okay.
Your Honor, let us know, this is Mary Baker. Let us know if there's something that we need to do on our end or if the technical issue is on the participants' end.
It is on our end. The computer just fully shut down to my knowledge, and they're getting a new one up. So thank you for being patient for us, but we will get going as soon as that's up.
So I will wait to see the request to be invited into the Zoom. And then when I see that, I will let them enter the Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. And if
Yes,
that doesn't work and you're in the same room, you could use the same computer if necessary. But try and reconnect first, okay?
I believe we have D. Lilac is joining.
Great, thank you. All right, Ms. Lilac, are you back on?
I am, I think. Can you see and hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, okay, there we go. Okay, permission to re-ask my last two questions.
I'll let you go back and re-ask that, and we'll resume timekeeping. You can proceed.
Thank you so much. Okay. How else is Lush reducing the impact of nitrogen fertilizers?
Well, they donate 10% of their profit. They put that aside, and they donate it towards causes of getting rid of dead zones caused by nitrogen from other fertilizers. But for the perception on how big this is and how much it's affecting our environment, there's a huge nitrogen hole in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's equivalent to the size of New Jersey. That's how big this issue has been infecting our environment.
With your research, have you found any link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, absolutely not.
Why are you continuing to stand by your research today?
I'm standing by my research because of all the stuff that I've done towards it. I know it can't be wrong. And I love my my brother, but I can't go against my science integrity that I have as a journalist.
How do you think the plaintiff developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Well,
Objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Lack of personal knowledge as well as speculation.
All right, response?
Your Honor, it is reasonable that my witness would have this knowledge and should be able to testify to this information since that foundation has already been laid.
Okay, any further response?
I stand by my objection, Your Honor.
All right. Subject to the expertise that you have, you can testify if you have an answer based upon your research.
Commissioner, we asked the question.
If you need to, go ahead.
How do you think the plaintiff developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Well, they had to develop it from their workplace. And quite frankly, they were exposed to a bunch of other chemicals besides Drufo, which a lot of them are extremely harmful, that they should have been wearing the protective gear. And furthermore, Haven Landscaping shouldn't have had them go out there without the protective gear. It's just absurd to have a 14-year-old boy walking around with no protective gear with these harmful chemicals.
What is your concern about this case?
My concern about this case is that Drufo is being accused of causing my brother's non-Hodgkin lymphoma when in fact the evidence just supports that it's another chemical out there that Haven Landscape had him in contact with.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Ms. Weirs. Let's begin by talking about your current occupation. You write for The Rationalist, correct?
Yes.
The Rationalist is devoted to scientific skepticism.
Yes, and other yellow journalism topics as well.
Scientific skepticism related to vaccines.
Yes.
Scientific skepticism related to climate change.
Yes, it's always good to double check the facts to make sure they're always relevant.
You have no formal education beyond your high school diploma, correct?
Yes, that's not necessary for my job occupation.
You do not have formal training in journalism.
No, I do not, but it wasn't necessary for my job.
Despite being an investigative journalist?
Yes, I didn't need it.
You never learned the ethics of scientific reporting.
I haven't previously testified to this, but I would if you would like me to right now.
That's all right. Let's talk about your gambling habits. You like to gamble.
Objection. Improper character evidence.
Okay, response?
According to Rule 404A1, Your Honor, I'm not going towards showing any of Skylar Weirs' character traits. I'm simply trying to lay foundation as to this witness's financial bias in this case. Furthermore, I'm not trying to prove that this witness acted in any manner in accordance with any character traits on a particular occasion.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, if this line of questioning is going towards her financial bias, then I believe it is improper character evidence. I don't think that it is necessary.
So to the extent gambling is not a fact in evidence, but it may go to a financial bias and impact her testimony, I'll allow some brief examination. And if it impacts her loyalty or reason for testifying for the defendant.
Permission to re-ask the question, Your Honor?
You may.
You like to gamble, correct?
I did like to gamble.
You're in debt because of gambling.
Yes, but everyone has debt. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I might be able to pay it off.
You've been in this debt for a few years now.
Yes, I have.
You're barely making ends meet.
Yes, but I'm making those ends meet.
Even with multiple jobs.
Yes, but I'm making those ends meet.
Your father decided to stop paying your debt off for you?
Yes, he did.
You and your twin are the only beneficiaries of your father's will.
I believe so at the moment.
If Dakota were to die, you would be the only beneficiary of the will.
I mean, Dakota's irreplaceable. That's my other half. But I mean, I guess, but my father can always verify or change his will and put other people in it. It's not my will to give.
If your father doesn't change his will and Dakota were to die, you would be the only beneficiary of the will.
Yes, but there's only a small probability that he wouldn't change it.
Let's talk about your research. You stated that nitrogen contributes to the development of cancer.
Yes.
Lush fertilizer contains nitrogen.
Yes, but so does every other fertilizer on the market.
Therefore, Lush fertilizer could contribute to the development of Dakota's cancer because it contains nitrogen.
Yes, but any other cancer can also contribute to that.
There's probably never going to be a chemical fertilizer that is truly safe, correct?
Yes, that's just how science works.
So Lush's fertilizer can't be truly safe.
Yes, but no other fertilizer on the market can always truly be safe.
Let's keep the answers to a yes or no, Ms. Weirs. There is no conclusive evidence that you can provide that disproves Drufo's connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Could you please repeat that?
Once again, please keep this answer a yes or a no. And here's the question. There is no conclusive evidence that you can provide that disproves Drufo's connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yes, I mean, it's inconclusive at best, but there's a definitely more causal link from pesticides to these cancers.
So that's a yes to my question. You don't have conclusive evidence.
Yes, but that's just sort of a matter of time science thing.
Ms. Weirs, no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, why should the jury believe your testimony even though you don't have a college degree?
Well, I have the experience for sure. I mean, I've spent just about under a year researching all this new, all about Drufo and this new agricultural technology. And I know from my research and all the time I've put in it that Drufo did not cause my brother's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Why is Lush the safest option when it comes to using other fertilizers?
Well, the nitrogen runoff is reduced because Lush only needs to be used 1 to 2 times versus other competitors where it's about 4 to 6. So that's significant. And there's just less pesticides by 37%.
No further redirect, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Weir, you're welcome to step down. Any further witnesses on behalf of defense?
The defense rests its case, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Leck. And any rebuttal on behalf of plaintiff?
Recross, Your Honor?
Any rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests its case.
All right, thank you. I'm going to give you 1 moment and you all collect your notes and then we'll proceed to closing arguments. All right. Plaintiff, you may proceed with your closing. I believe we reserved requested some reservation for your closing and rebuttal. So you may proceed if you have time.
It is astonishing what Lush has done to turn a profit. What you have all witnessed today is a poor Dakota Weirs paying the price for the excessive negligence on the part of Lush Fertilizer, a company whose money fears have silenced Dakota Weirs. Dakota Weirs has sat in front of you all today and has testified how he is the one paying the price. His opportunity to go to college has been stripped from him. His ability to play the piano has been brutally snatched, and his family has even been torn apart as his own twin of all people is testifying against him today. You've heard from the CEO of Lush Fertilizers, one Blake Doncourt, who apparently donates 10% of their company's profits to charity. Yet this act of goodwill quickly becomes marred in controversy when you take into account that baking the fertilizer, an action that would have resolved any risk of the fertilizer being carcinogenic, was not done because it created a 1% increase in costs. Yet Lush was fine throwing 10% at charities, simply because they wanted to keep their public image safe. We even hear from Carson Durst, an ex-employee of Lush, who has testified to the shady business acts performed by Lush. There's even a story where one of her findings is blatantly ignored by upper management simply so they could fit the bill. Dr. Casey Rogers has testified today how individuals exposed to Drufo are 10 times more likely to contract non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Many may call out his study and say that it hasn't been peer-reviewed, or that it compared apples to oranges. However, even a 7th grader knows about a control group and how you need to have some variable that you don't change. Dr. Rogers, a man with a PhD, no doubt factored this into his conclusions. The CEO had to go through a rough divorce. There's no way around it. During this time, they also had to face Terra Greenery, who's coming out with a rival product. On top of all of this, they had to start paying more money to keep their workers at their company. No wonder they decided to cut the costs. Skylar Weirs has testified about journalism. However, she never had a formal education. And in journalism, you're taught a thing known as ethics. Skylar Weirs clearly has not been taught this, as she has testified to not only, as she has written journals about everything from flat earth conspiracies to anti-vax culture to chemtrails. Dakota Weirs has had his life derailed. Dakota Weirs was once a young prodigy destined for Juilliard. Now, we're not even sure they will live. Preponderance or evidence is the burden of proof. Whichever argument has the most substantial evidence wins. The plaintiff has undoubtedly met their burden of proof. Due to a lack of warning on the labels, Dakota did not know the gravity of her situation when she decided not to wear protection. The worst she figured was a skin irritation, better than the heat stroke of wearing the protective materials. Had Lush included a label stating that their fertilizer was carcinogenic, Dakota would have undoubtedly worn the protection. She simply did not know. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to do the right thing and find Lush Fertilizer guilty of the extreme amounts of negligence that they have performed.
Thank you. And closing on behalf of the defense.
This case is about the plaintiff's bad judgment. Lush Fertilizer should in no way be held accountable for something they had no role in. The illness of one person should not be pinned on a company when the plaintiff has failed to prove Drufo even caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The plaintiff made the conscious decision to neglect his personal safety despite what was stated on the Lush Fertilizer packaging and what several people, including his boss at Haven Landscaping, had told him. Even the plaintiff's own expert witness, Dr. Rogers, testified to the importance masks and protective gear have when working with potentially harmful chemicals. The plaintiff used bad judgment and did not follow these recommendations. The plaintiff worked with numerous chemicals over a period of several years. There is no way they can be sure that Lush is the sole cause of his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Any other of the products he used and worked with over those years could have led to his illness. Negligence is when a person fails to act in a reasonable manner, despite having the resources to do so. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is vital that you understand that if it wasn't for him overlooking his personal responsibility when working with potentially harmful chemicals, we would not be here today. Lush is not at fault in this case. The plaintiff did not use Drufo the way Lush Fertilizer intended. Lush had to exercise reasonable care by including instructions for use, as seen today in Exhibit 1. This proves the affirmative defense, since the plaintiff failed to follow the clear instructions, making his conduct the direct cause of his illness. However, if the jury does find Lush to be at fault, they then must perform a comparative fault analysis and should find that we are only 10% at fault. The plaintiff's own negligence and repeated bad judgment would make him 90% at fault. The plaintiff has failed to meet the burden of proof for their case for two reasons. Number one, the plaintiff has not shown you any definitive link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Number two, Lush Fertilizer's CEO dealt with all the concerns Drufo had by assembling an extensive research team before Drufo even hit the market. Furthermore, the plaintiff is required to prove by preponderance of evidence that Lush did not exercise reasonable care and that they failed to protect the user from an unreasonable risk of harm. The plaintiff did not demonstrate this today. Lush is not at fault for the plaintiff's bad judgment. Today, you have heard from 6 witnesses. You heard from Blake Doncourt, Lush Fertilizer's CEO. She put extensive research and testing into Drufo before releasing it to the market. This actively demonstrates Lush Fertilizer's reasonable care when it comes to protecting their users. Blake has also used Lush Fertilizer's revenue to donate and contribute to several environmental charities. The plaintiff has argued today that we are here due to Lush money fears, but her donations directly combat that claim. You heard from Skylar Weirs, an investigative journalist who, despite her relation to Dakota, knows Drufo is safe. As an investigative journalist, she has read through a multitude of different reliable sources before coming to the conclusion that Drufo is safe. You heard from Dr. Devin Williams, Lush Fertilizer's top scientist. She analyzed all the errors and faults in Dr. Rogers' study and proved that Drufo complied with the 20th century fertilizer standards. You heard from Dakota Weirs herself, who testified that he neglected to wear his protective gear and chose to forgo his previous instructions. You heard from Carson Durst, someone who was never qualified to work at Lush Fertilizer in the first place. In their testimony today, they reference Exhibit 3, a study of Drufo being carcinogenic in rats. This study does in no way prove Drufo is carcinogenic in humans. Not only does the study not relate to humans, but it is about a chemical found in Drufo, not Drufo itself. Even more, the study monitored the effects after ingesting the chemical, something the plaintiff did not do. Finally, you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers. His faulty studies proved nothing definitive against Drufo, since all of the farmers were exposed to several other chemicals. While some of them may have developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it is not from Lush Fertilizer. Members of the jury, I ask you to really look at the facts presented to you. Lush Fertilizer should not be held responsible for something the plaintiff could have prevented if he just followed the simple precautions. With the plaintiff's amount of exposure to several other chemicals and pesticides, can you, the jury, be more sure than not that Drufo is the cause of the plaintiff's cancer? The defense asks you to rule in favor of the defendant, Lush Fertilizer.
Thank you, Ms. Lilac. And Mr. Fleming, if you had any time reserved, your final words?
Just before that, I would like to ask how much time exactly I have.
My clock says that you got 1:16 left.
Thank you. The defense states that this case is about bad judgment. While they are correct, the bad judgment is on the part of Lush Fertilizer here. If they had any inclination that their fertilizer was carcinogenic, they should have put warnings on their products. Dakota has testified that if she would have known the gravity of her situation, that she undoubtedly would have worn the protection. She did not know, or he did not know what he was getting into. The defense also states that one part of Drufo was carcinogenic, and therefore Drufo is not carcinogenic. That doesn't make sense. If you add sugar to milk, sugar does not stop being sugar. A company should put excess warnings should it believe any safety concerns are at hand, especially when we're dealing with a life-threatening cancer. Does a recommendation sound like the type of language you would be using to warn someone about death?
Okay. Mr. Fleming, we lost you, but I think your time was up.
He
Okay.
actually lost 10 seconds if he wants to add one more thing in.
I'm good, but thank you.
Okay. Technical difficulties are always fun. So I think that concludes the presentation, and for the timekeeper and the panelists, the jurors, and everybody, you're welcome to turn on your cameras when you're ready, but I'll just say congratulations, good job, guys. And what I'm going to do is we're going to take about 3 minutes and let the panelists do their scoring. And then when they are done, they'll let us know, and then we'll go to comments while we submit that, okay? All right. So why don't you all take about 2 minutes, take a deep breath, and then Ms. Baker, maybe you can let us know when we're ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, what I've been seeing the courtrooms do is the judge, if you feel up to it, Your Honor, is giving some feedback while the scoring panelists are tallying their scores and submitting them. And then as each scorekeeper finishes, if they'll let us know in turn, then when you've submitted your scores, scorekeeper, then you give some positive, constructive feedback. And we go through that until we're done. So once again, thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Baker. So first of all, great job, guys. It's kind of a difficult problem that you all have, and I thought you really argued well and presented your case well. I did have a couple things I want to suggest to you as you move forward, and I'm sure you both will be moving into further competitions. One thing I would suggest to you is reading of exhibits, and you may want to use this to throw off the other side. If an exhibit is admitted, some of you asked to read the exhibit or parts of it, and that can be helpful, but if you want to throw a little wrench in the other side, you can always object and say the document speaks for itself. And that would then eliminate their reading that in. That's just a tool that often counsel uses because there's no reason to read something that the jury in theory is going to be able to look at. The other thing I thought was great, a couple of you used your power as the examiner to control the testimony. And usually you'll see that in cross-examination. And I think the last witness was a good example. The next question is yes or no. Or I just need a yes or no answer. Or you can stop the witness. Sometimes you'll get an objection and say, if you could just give me one answer and not add to it. So as an example, the last expert, Miss Weir, kind of wanted to go on and give you all sorts of explanations of things. She did a great job. The question was really a yes or no answer. Keep her to that, or keep that witness to the yes or no. Don't let them start to go more into things. So show that you have the right and the ability to control the witness through your examination. One thing I would tell you guys to do as you proceed through this, and if you move up into the competition, you'll be appearing in front of more judges like myself that see this type of litigation every day. And one thing I would encourage you to do on your openings and closings is, first of all, ask if you can proceed. And that's just a courtesy to the court and to the jurors to let them know that you're about ready to begin. Okay. It's always a nice touch, I think, for you to say, you know, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel, Your Honor, you know, may I proceed, or good morning. It acknowledges that you respect and know that they're there. Similarly, when you go to closings, I would recommend you do the same thing. It's okay to thank or note counsel's work in the case and appreciate how they handled the case as well. So just be mindful of that. And always thank the jury for their time as you wrap up. You know, we have volunteers here today. We love to do this because we want to support you and help move you forward. But generally, you're always going to thank the jury because they are normal citizens that volunteer or are summoned to court to listen to your story. So just wrap up and do that with a thank you and acknowledge their hard work they did sitting through the trial and listening to you. Okay. I can tell you the rulings of evidence that I made are not normally the ones that I would make in a real trial. The rules are kind of fluxed here because we want you to continue to go on. So if you do get a judge that rules against you, that's okay. You can come back and try and get it in a different way, or just move on. And so when you do have an objection, make a great argument. I thought you all made really good arguments on your objections. Sometimes you're going to get it sustained, meaning the court upholds your objection. Sometimes it's going to be overruled. And if it's sustained, go ahead and try and get it back in a different way. It's okay for you to try. Anybody have any questions for me? Oh, good. Okay. The other thing I'll tell you, after doing 2 years of trials through this type of technology, if your computer falls off or you drop your exhibit, it's completely fine. Just let parties know what happened. And I thought you did a great job. I don't know if your computer fell off your stand or something got knocked over, but that's okay. Just do exactly like you did. Say, I'm sorry, our computer just shut down. Maybe we have a minute. And yeah, you guys did a great job of having your microphones muted. So make sure you always do that if you're not participating as well. So, okay. I think we're starting to get some of the panelists to come on, and go ahead and announce yourself and give you your comments.
Hi, Judge. Tom Nellison. I'm an attorney here in Douglas County. I was quite amazed with the poise of everybody here. You were very professional in your approach and very precise in your questioning. I thought that was very good. The witnesses, I thought, did an amazing job, all of the witnesses, especially for this type of fact pattern, which is not something that I'm usually involved in. I do criminal defense and some divorce cases, but I have done some of these civil cases, and they're not the most thrilling things to do. I found the cross-examinations were really good. Picking up some points and trying to shuffle some of the facts on the witnesses' inconsistencies. Those are good, but I think everybody should have stressed those more, especially for just an example, when we were talking about Skylar's work and what she does with the kind of alt type journalism that she does. That could have gone in even deeper. Of course, you have a time limit, so I understand why you didn't and why having to get on to the next topic is so important. Generally, on these types of cases, you're not going to have time limits, and you can just go do your thing as an attorney. In these competitions, obviously, you have time limits, so you got to pick and choose. The openings and closings I thought were amazing. I thought the openings I thought were a little more closing type arguments. They were good if you got rid of the closing type argument portion and started talking about the evidence will show this, not present it as if the evidence has already been presented and then jump into this is what the witnesses are going to say. Other than that, I thought everybody did a wonderful job. I thought there were a couple standouts, and I'm not gonna pick and choose any names, but there were some very strong participants in this group, and I think both sides have a good chance of moving on. Any questions of me?
All right, thank you. I'll just go left to right. Ms. Baker.
I think you guys did wonderful. You had great tempo. That's something that is really important when you're speaking, and you're not rushing through it. You weren't flabbergasted, and I thought you guys had really good recovery on your objections. So I think that's really great. I actually just passed the bar, and so I'm a brand new lawyer, so I know how scary this is. So I think you all did really great, and I really hope you all actually pursue a career in law because you have great oral skills and great presentation. So good job.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. And Ms. Action.
Hi, sorry I'm disappearing. I have a recalcitrant pit bull. I've been doing this kind of judging for a real long time, for 37 years. I did plaintiff's personal injury work before switching to primarily domestic. I am really impressed with you folks and how you're studying the rules of evidence. That's huge. You all did very, very well. I was also extremely impressed about, I know a lot of people that don't know how to qualify an expert witness, how important that could be, how good that is. And all of you take every single one of your witnesses out immediately tonight and buy them a hideously expensive steak dinner. They were awesome. Every last one of you guys, your witnesses, you're real good. You got right up to the edge of being what I call the stinky witness, but you didn't cross it over. Okay, you want to turn off a jury, do that. Again, I think there were some standouts too. I judged the national mock trials, and there were teams that won because of their witnesses. And so the power of Colorado Rules of Evidence 701 et sec, qualifying witnesses, cannot be understated. And you folks knew that. I'm not a real fan of just answer yes or no. I'm a real fan of let them pay out rope and see what you can do with them later. But it was, and you all were very respectful to the court. You didn't sass the court. You'd be surprised how many people do that. It's like, oh my goodness, don't do that. But, you know, and the rulings were real thoughtful, and they were real trial oriented. And with your court, you all did well. It's like putting on a coat. You have to listen to your judge and figure out how your judge works for a little bit, and then you can hop on there. But I was just, there was one battle of the exhibit people, and I can't remember who it was, but it was like watching really good TV. You guys were wonderful. And congratulations to your coaches as well. And thank you for letting me participate. It was also very nice to see my colleagues, Ms. Baker, and hi, Tom, and Your Honor. A pleasure to appear before you, sir. Good luck, guys. Don't forget the dinner.
Or the milkshake.
Or the milkshakes. There you go. Thank you for all those nice comments. And you know, you may have heard this before, but it really is true. And it goes to what Ms. Ashton was saying. You know, I see hundreds of litigants in my courtroom every day. You guys do way better than more than half of them. And you should be really proud of the way you handled yourself, the way you proceeded with questions, and to Ms. Ashton's point, the way you treated the other parties. It's not like the old days where you used to beat up the witness and that was the way to win litigation. Juries don't like necessarily to see that. And so being polite and courteous, you can still get the zinger answer. You can still wrap around the expert testimony and use it against them in a polite way. And the jury gets that. So I thought you did a really good job. And likewise, it's really a privilege for me to spend the morning with you. And you and your coaches and your family and team did an awesome job. So with that, we're going to let you get a lunch break, and we're going to congratulate you. Best of luck, guys. Good luck going forward.
Before you go, scoring panelists, have you turned in and submitted your scores?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
office is asking me to double check.
Nope, I'm supposed to call Laura right now, and that's just what I'm going to be doing, boss.
Okay, you got it, Miss Passion. And Miss Baker, did you turn yours in?
Yeah, I already did. I sent you a message on the chat that says submitted.
Oh, perfect. And then Mr. Nelson, you did as well. Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay, Miss Ashton will follow up with you. Thank you, everyone, and best of luck to all of you in your futures.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys.
Good job.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
all so
Thank
much for
you.
your time.